We've had the Infiniti G35x alphabet numerical car for about a month now, and in that time, because we still have the 4 Series, we've not driven it at all. But really, it has shown us what a solid car it actually is. On top of that, on this very windy day, we have now had the 4 Series since January 2017, and overall, it's proven to be one of the most fantastic cars in the world, and I don't think there is a German sports coupe or even sedan that I would take over the 4 Series or 3 Series. It is that solid of a car. It's unbelievable. So while we have both of the cars together, I thought it would be interesting to compare how two sports sedans kind of compare to each other, even though they're from two completely different times and two completely different countries known for completely different things. Now, I know I'm not starting this video off in the best way because obviously, depending on your bias, one of them is going to be the clear winner. But hear me out. It is going to be interesting to see how two sporty sedans, I mean, minus 2 doors on the 4 Series, actually compare to each other. Because when you look at it, they are targeted at a similar customer base. Before we jump into the video, I want to make one quick point. This video is not scientific in any way, if you couldn't tell that already. We're just going to really be comparing the different parts about the two cars that are similar enough to compare, but really different enough. This is all just for fun and to see how far luxury sedans and luxury cars have come over the past really 12 years. First up, let's talk about design. They both have some. And to be honest, both of them for their generations were some of the best looking cars out. However, there's no denying the Infiniti after 12 years is starting to look a little outdated, but the same could be said for the 3 Series from 10 years ago. In fact, the 4 Series will probably look outdated in the next 10 years as well.
I don't believe it.
Now, obviously, if I had to pick a clear winner based on the design of these two cars alone, I would go with the 4 Series. I mean, who wouldn't? But if we take it back to 2006 and look at the 2006 3 Series compared to this 2006 G35, that would be a little tougher. You see, the problem with the 2006 3 Series is that, as much as I hate to say it because I love BMWs, the 2006 3 Series is just honestly a bit bland. The Infiniti for 2006 is a damn good looking car. Like I said, both of these cars look very good and are some of the best from their generations. I mean, compare this to a 2006 C-Class, and the C-Class is just honestly disgustingly outdated. And compared to 2006 Audi A4, the Audi is just so much more boring. And if you compare it to this 2006 Jaguar, well, that's still in the garage, so yet to be determined. The Infiniti, on the other hand, still looks fairly modern. Sure, it's missing some modern styling cues like LED headlamps and running lights and stuff like that, but overall the Infiniti isn't too bad on design. In fact, the taillights actually look really good, especially for a luxury Nissan. Things with the 4 Series are pretty promising as well. Sure, we haven't seen it age over the past 12 years, but we have seen the 3 Series Coupe age over the last 12 years. And it's still a kicking car. It honestly is missing just as many styling cues as the Infiniti, so they're pretty even there. And in fact, add a couple doors to this 4 Series and make a 3 Series, because adding more creates less of a number, and you have one of the best looking sedans ever. It's hard to decide a winner here because the 4 Series is just more sporty looking in general. It's also at an unfair advantage for being 8 years newer. But I think that says just how good the Infiniti actually looks. I can't pick a winner here because if I had to, I'd go with a combination of the two, which I suppose would either be a 3 Series or an Infiniti G35 Coupe. Now let's talk about performance, and I'll keep this one short because it's pretty obvious. All things considered, the 4 Series is way better of a car for performance, and I really don't think anyone who has an unmodified Infiniti and an unmodified 4 Series would disagree. The 4 Series is so much better balanced, so much more fun to drive, such more of a driver's car, and handles a million times better. Now, is the Infiniti slow? No, it's really not. It's actually a pretty quick car for when it came out. But unmodified, the 4 Series is just, it's gonna win by default. Sure, that tuned for sporty driving BMW is going to make it better, but let's just be fair. Comparing the two, stock, this one is faster. That's not to say that the Infiniti couldn't be modified to be 10 times faster than the 4 Series. In fact, it could, but we're talking about unmodified, completely bone stock cars here, minus the fact that this one has an intake on it. So now it's time to talk about some quirks, aka Doug DeMuro's trademarked word. Now personally, I like a car with a bit of character. It's probably why I like Jaguar, Land Rover, and BMW so much, but to To be honest, the BMW is such a solid car, it actually lacks a few quirks. The Infiniti, though, is pretty quirky. Back to the note of the 4 Series, what I was saying before is that it is so over-engineered, it's near perfect. And yes, there are things I dislike about it, but that's my personal opinion. Overall, though, it's a very solid car, and in fact, I think it's one of the best cars to ever come out of BMW. Now, I know that's going to inundate me over time with many people who are going to send me a 16-paragraph email telling me why some BMW from 1738 is the best BMW to ever come off the production line, even though it didn't, but still. You get my point. For a modern BMW, or for really any BMW, the 4 Series is by far one of the best, in my opinion. All in all, though, the 4 Series is such a solid car that it really doesn't have too many quirks about it. Like I said, there are things I dislike, and there are a couple quirks, but none aside from iDrive are worth mentioning, which is more of an inconvenience, not a quirk. The Infiniti, though, is a very different story. For example, the steering wheel has an easy entry and exit feature, but rather than making it just the steering column, like most cars, it actually appears to move the entire gauge cluster with it. Why? Who looked at this and thought, yep, that is necessary? While I don't have the answer to that, I'm glad they did. Sure, it's a quirky feature that probably other models have, but I don't care. It's really cool that that car actually has it. On top of that, there's all of the screens around the car. Modern cars are all about seamless designs with screens floating across the dashboard to create a beautiful and elegant design. And I admire that ridiculousness. It's nice to see such a subtle company create something so unnecessary. Now, with the moving dashboard and the screens, all 42 of them, comes some other interesting features like the seat controls. Now, if you've been in one of these before and you know how to work the seats, that's perfectly fine, but you have to admit, it's a bit of a shock the first time you get in the car. It honestly looks like window switches down on the seat. So you can imagine my surprise the first time I thought it would roll down the window and I ended up playing poker in the back seat. So for the first few times you use them, you're really just playing with its special little buttons and you have no idea what you're actually doing. In fact, it does really just look like window switches down next to the passenger and driver's seat. In fact, if you come from a history of Land Rovers where the Discovery 2 had its window switches in the center, you may be inclined to think that is exactly what it is, but it's not. Now there's the topic of keys. Now I know BMW are notorious for using the same key throughout their entire model lineup, which, let's be fair, most companies are. But Nissan and Infiniti take this almost as far as Volvo and Aston Martin. Now the problem is this little cheap piece of plastic right here is the same key design that you would get on a GTR and a 2006 $900 Infiniti G35x, which is like a 100th of the price. But that's not the only quirk about this key. Apparently in 2006 we could have features like keyless entry and a button on the outside of the car to open the door, and we had things like the ability to detect a key when it's in the car, but for some reason it's not a push to start button, it just knows when the key's in there so that you can turn a toy. It's like a child's toy that you turn that turns the car on, instead of a push button. I find it ridiculous that technology was at a point where they could do push to start if they had just, I don't know, tried. But the problem with it is they didn't. And I realize complaining about a 12-year-old car makes no sense whatsoever, so I'm really not, but it is kind of funny to me that technology to sense when the key is in the car was there, but they didn't utilize it in the way that really makes sense at all. So instead of having a luxurious button to press in your luxury sedan, you turn a fake key. Now moving back to the BMW, the biggest quirk it has is that there really are no quirks at all, which is pretty surprising because it's a very solid car, and we're all fairly surprised by that because really I don't think anybody expects the first generation of a new BMW to really be as solid as it actually is. So going for quirks, I'd choose the Infiniti. So we've talked about quirks and exterior styling, but we haven't really talked about interior whatsoever. Again, this is going to be a more difficult one to do because the BMW is just so much more modern than the Infiniti, but if we take it back to 2006 with the BMW, there are still quite a few points to be made about the Infiniti compared to the BMW. Overall, aging aside, the BMW has way nicer of an interior. It has nicer materials, it has nicer leather, it has better fitting seats, even though the Infinitis are more comfortable, and overall the just build quality of the BMW is far superior to that of the Infiniti. The woods are on such a higher level, the plastics are even on a higher level, and the entire trim is just much nicer. Now, overall, the Infiniti has a very nice interior. It has lots of features, it has lots of space, and it is very comfortable and decently quiet. But its biggest problem comes when you realize that the wood looks like a cheap child's toy. It is really not the nicest wood in the world, and there's really few accents to make it look better. So overall, the BMW, even from 2006, wins out every time on interior. While the Infiniti over here is a very nice consumer sedan, the BMW is a nice car compared to most. Overall, just based on interior and material quality, I would have to go with the BMW, but let's be fair, it's just so much nicer on the inside, even the 2006 BMWs. So with interior, exterior, and driving experience considered, which one is the best? Honestly, the Infiniti. It's fun, simple, easy to fix yourself, and now relatively cheap. In fact, this one, for those of you who didn't know, was $900. So overall, the Infiniti here is really an amazing car because it's withstood the test of 12 years and still competes with even modern sedans. Just not the perfectly overly engineered 4 series.
Heated of. When no one headed.
Take headed of.
No one would take headed of my instructions.
That one. So with all things considered, I think the Infiniti might actually win this one, even though there's really no scientific way of comparing the two cars except for personal opinion and personal taste. Now, the thing is, the Infiniti only wins because it is so much cheaper but still has everything you would really ever need, but I'll always have a soft spot for that car. It is truly a fantastic car, and while there are things that I don't necessarily love about it, overall, you can't beat it, like, at all. So overall though, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications to get notified every time we upload a new video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.